I'm Carl Paulson, and with me is David Hoffeld, the author of the best-selling book, The Science of Selling. David is the CEO and chief sales trainer of Hoffeld Group, and he's developed a groundbreaking sales approach based on neuroscience and behavioral science that's proven to radically increase sales. Because of the results his insights have generated, David has lectured at Harvard Business School and has been featured in Fast Company, Fortune, U.S. News and World Report, The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Harvard Business Review, CBS Radio, and that's just to name a few. David and I have known each other for a couple of years now, and I consider David on the level of Mr. Miyagi when it comes to sales coaching. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how to tackle one of the biggest challenges any salesperson can face, and that's cold call reluctance. David, two questions for you. One, how are you doing? Two, have you ever seen The Karate Kid?
Let's start with the easy one first. I'm doing really well. Excited to be with you today. Have I seen Karate Kid? I've seen all of the Karate Kids, at least the original ones. And then also the new Cobra Kai. I don't know if you've checked that out on YouTube. I saw the first season of that, and I liked that a lot too. I thought it was really, really well done.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan. I watched it this weekend and cannot get enough of the Karate Kid. So,
yeah,
David, you have coached salespeople at Fortune 500 companies, startups, and everything in between. In your experience, why is it that cold call reluctance is such a big challenge to overcome for so many salespeople?
Yeah, it really causes a lot of people to struggle, and kind of like when you and I first met, that was something that you were dealing with as well. And it's very common. I think many salespeople have dealt with it. Most have on some level, but for a pretty large percentage of salespeople, it becomes a real problem. It's something that they have a hard time getting through. And the reality of the situation is, reaching out to a new potential client for the first time is daunting because there is quite simply a high rate of rejection. And people often don't like that. That's the part of selling they don't really like, because the likelihood of getting rejected is much higher than literally any other time in the sale. And so for that reason, and a few others as well, it causes people to just be really reluctant to embrace, generating that new business, which is something that as sales professionals, we have to be focused on doing if we're going to keep our pipelines full. So it's something we have to do, but for many, that reluctance really inhibits them from doing it at their best.
And that cold call reluctance translates to giving sales presentations to groups of executives and even, running a sales booth at a convention. It all kind of encompasses that fear. And I know when we first got connected a couple of years ago, I reached out because I had become so reluctant to make a cold call. I would just stare at my phone, sometimes for hours, unable to pick it up and make a call. And when I did make cold calls, it was between the hours of probably like 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. because I knew no one would pick up the phone. I remember telling you when I first reached out to you that I felt like one of those baseball players that gets the yips and can't throw the ball to first base anymore, and it ruins their careers. So, David, what's going on inside the brain? What was going on inside my brain when you're so scared to pick up the phone to even make a cold call?
Yeah. And that's an important question, is what's going on in the brain. And the good news is science tells us exactly what's going on. And the reason why that matters so much is it's hard to fight against the unknown. And something that, like you've described, severe cold call reluctance, that's really inhibiting your ability to make sales, earn an income for you and your family and for your employer. I mean, that's a big deal. And so it's something we can't guess our way to success at. We have to look right to, what does science say? And science gives us a very clear picture of what's going on. Our brains are very complex organs, but science kind of helps us understand what, at least at a high level, I'll share what's happening there. And the long and short of it is, one part of our brain I'll call our listeners' attention to is what's called the amygdala. Now, the amygdala comes from the Greek word for almond. The reason is because we have two amygdalas, one on each side of our heads, and they're shaped like an almond. And so that's where the word comes from. And the amygdalas do a lot of important things. One of the things they do is when you or I are in a fight or flight mindset, meaning you're walking along, let's say in the jungle, and a tiger jumps out, right? Instantly, the amygdala commandeers your brain, and you're in this fight or flight mentality. And it's extremely useful when you're in a state where you need to survive. However, if we bring that to our modern world, in our modern sales climate, and you're in an office trying to make a cold call, the amygdala commandeering your brain is not useful. And that's exactly what's happening. And though that's useful when you have to run from a tiger or fight a tiger,
which I do daily.
Yeah, of course you do. You're that kind of guy. And that's useful then, but in the real world, when we're trying to make a cold call, it's not, because here's why. When you're in that state for even a short period of time, you'll find that it inhibits creative thought, it inhibits problem solving. People will say, I don't think well. So even if I do get a hold of someone on the phone when they're in that state, they have a hard time adapting to what that buyer might say. And they say, I'm not really me. And the reason is because their amygdala is overstimulated. It's commandeering the brain, and it really inhibits them from selling at a high level. So this is not a minor issue. This is something that you want to address. And the good news is, because science tells us what's happening, it also tells us what we can do about it.
So what is the key to solving this issue? I mean, what do we have to do with this amygdala in order for us to be able to make cold calls? And then, like you said, once we get on the cold call, confidently get through it.
Yeah, and this is kind of what we dealt with when we first started getting together and doing some training and coaching, was how do we essentially keep that amygdala calm? Because when you, going back to your example, would look at the phone, all of a sudden you get in this heightened state, this fear-based state, and it paralyzes you. And then if you do get someone on the phone, you're not as effective as you normally are. So we got to calm that amygdala down. And so there's a couple ways to do this. The most effective way is really to give us a new point of comparison. Now, here's what that means. And this is kind of what we did with you. I put you, and I'll let you describe it, in an extreme situation and ask you to do your cold call presentation. And because you were in such an extreme situation where your amygdala was overcharged, you were in a heightened state of fear, it was out of your comfort zone, we did something extreme, but really within about 30 minutes of doing that, it changed your entire career. And I want you to kind of share what we did and how it affected you. But I've seen you personally make cold calls after that time, and you're fearless. I mean, you just dive right in.
I love it.
There's no apprehension. You're able to adapt. I mean, you're at your best. So what we did there was we just recalibrated your amygdala, and we kept it calm. So later on, when you started making cold calls, it was easy. So why don't you share, Carl, walk our listeners through, what did I put you through to get you these results?
So when we started coaching a couple of years ago, I remember my biggest obstacle was overcoming this severe case of cold call reluctance. And I remember for one of our sessions, you said, we're going to meet at a local shopping mall. And I was like, okay, I had no idea what I was in for. So we get to the shopping mall, and we sit down, and you told me to start walking around the mall and reciting my cold call script, and not to pitch it to people that are walking by, because that's illegal, but to make eye contact with shoppers as they pass me by. And once I finished going through, my cold call script once, you'd up the ante bit by bit. Maybe that was me walking in a certain direction, maybe going to a busier part of the mall, maybe making a little bit more direct eye contact and getting a little bit louder in terms of my voice while I'm, going through my cold call pitch. And it got to the point where after running through this for 10, 15 minutes, you had me in the busiest part of the mall, making a ton of eye contact. And I was so loud, I felt like I was an actor in a Shakespeare play. I think the whole mall could hear me. And after I got through at that time, I came back to you and you looked at me and you said, how do you feel? And I looked at you and said, I'm ready to go make some cold calls. And and as nerve wracking as that exercise was, it was 100% worth it because, like you said, it's been a couple of years now since that exercise, and you've heard me on a weekly basis now make cold calls, and there is no fear, no hesitation, no reluctance. Doesn't even cross my mind. In fact, I think when you hear me making cold calls to these CEOs, these executives, I have fun doing it. I like challenging myself. It's a fun experience for me now.
Right.
And it's all because of this 30-minute exercise you had me go through. So David, how can listeners out there that are dealing with cold call reluctance, sales presentation reluctance, public speaking reluctance, how can they easily replicate the exercise that you put me through on their own?
Yeah, and that's the important question. And what we want to do is we want to tame that amygdala. We're going to keep it calm so it doesn't commandeer your brain and interrupt creative thought, problem solving abilities, all that. And so the best way to do it, or the fastest way to do that, which is what we did, is we didn't take a long time to just, push through that fear. We just knocked it out in 30 minutes. And the way we did that was we created an extreme environment. Something that if sitting in your office making a cold call frightens you, then walking around a mall looking like a crazy person, right, and feeling like that, and while you're doing your script is much more terrifying. But when you do that, here's what happens. When you went back to the office the next day and you looked at the phone, all of a sudden your brain said, well, this is nothing. We just did this in a mall yesterday. Now that's scary. Doing it here in my office is nothing. And so by comparison, one of the ways our brains form quick judgments instinctively is by comparison, right? How do you know that something is a good price or a bad price? Usually instinctively, your brain will compare it to what you paid for before or what others have paid. So we do that in all kind of areas. And a lot of times, because this cold calling is so daunting, because when we look at other parts of the sale, the likelihood of rejection is far less. It's much easier, more enjoyable to do. So we needed a new point of comparison for that amygdala to keep your brain calm. So it didn't react like you just walked out in the jungle and saw a tiger. Now it was reacting like for what it was, reality. You're sitting in an office calling another person on the phone, which really isn't that challenging once you give your brain that new point of comparison. So I would encourage our listeners to look for how can you go to the next level. So if you're scared of cold calling or you're scared of public speaking, what can you do to conquer that fear fast, right? Because that's inhibiting. If you're in the profession of selling, that is costing you sales. It's costing you money. It's hindering your life. And so take it seriously, but what can you do? Because going extreme like we did, and though it's uncomfortable for 30 minutes, it's a game changer after that. And you're so glad you did it. Plus, what people find is when they do things like that, right? So if you're afraid of public speaking, for example, and you say, you know what I'm going to do? I want to join Toastmasters. And every week I'm going to go and do presentations in front of people, even though I'm petrified, right? Because you're doing that, because you're putting yourself in those situations, just like you experienced, Carl, you have confidence. Now, when you get back in front of that phone or you get back in front of a presentation, you go, you know what? This is nothing because I just went through this at the mall. People thought I was nuts. I'm going to call one person from the safety of my office. This is nothing. And so it gives you, not only is your amygdala calm, but your confidence goes up. And it's not any false confidence. We call it self-efficacy. You earned it. You put yourself in a challenging situation and you conquered it. And now when you go back to making cold calls, delivering presentations, you walk in with this extreme amount of confidence that's earned. And that's the most powerful confidence. It's not tricks you go through to kind of create this false sense of confidence, but reality-based confidence where I earn my confidence. And how do I do it? I do hard things that not only calm my amygdala, but tell me, man, when I get on that phone, no matter what comes at me, it's going to be a lot less than going through this at the mall, right? So that point of comparison, and it's been a while since we did that. I mean, we're talking about a year or 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And it's been a game changer, I know, for you. Just your confidence level, not just your confidence on the phone, but your confidence level is, I mean, just skyrocketing as well.
Yeah, yeah, and it can even be. I remember you telling me once. It could even be as simple as in your bedroom or somewhere in your house with a mirror, having your friend or significant other maybe throwing plastic water bottles at
Yep.
you while you're going
Yep.
through your. I mean, there are so many creative ways to
Yep.
do this, and it can be you're stuck in traffic. Roll down the windows and give it a try. There are so many different ways that you can up the ante for 30 minutes, come out of that
Yep.
with this confidence that I promise you, because I've experienced it myself. You're right; it doesn't go away. In fact, it gets better and better and better, which is
Yep.
the most amazing thing. And our assignment this week for anyone listening is to go through the cold call exercise we just described on your own and send an email to contact@hoffeldgroup.com. That's contact@hoffeldgroup, HOFFELD group.com, and describe how you conducted the exercise, what you did, and what the outcomes were for you. Even better, anyone that emails us will automatically be entered into a drawing to win a free signed copy of David's best-selling book, The Science of Selling. To check out some more science-based sales strategies and resources you can start using today, visit us at hoffeldgroup.com. That's www.hoffeldgroup.com. Drop us a note on the contact page and make sure to check out some of our free cutting edge science-based strategy resources. Again, you can start using today. Better yet, like and share our content on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and drop us an email and be entered in a chance to win a free signed copy of a great book. In our next episode, we are going to talk about the number one thing you can do to make sure you never fall into a sales slump and how to ensure you are continually growing your sales, which I'm sure tons of people out there want to make sure that they're doing. David, as always, it is always so much fun talking to you. Love talking sales with you. Have a great rest of your week, and we will talk soon.